Hello everyone, my name's Neil. If you haven't seen any of my videos, I have some chronic illnesses. One is end-stage liver cirrhosis. I also have a connective tissue disorder called hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, as well as 3 hernias. I'm on a feeding tube, and a bunch of other fun things that go with it. Today's video, I wanted to talk about coping with some tips on how to help yourself in getting through having liver cirrhosis. As far as some tips that you can do that have worked for me. These are not from a doctor. Definitely you should always follow your doctor's orders. Listen to your doctor, check in with them quite often, especially if you have cirrhosis. That is very important. These are what have worked for me, and I'm just going to share them with you. First we got to talk about some symptoms. One of them is fluid retention, ascites. You can get that in your stomach, where you get a very large stomach, extended. You can get it in your legs, other parts of your body. I kept getting it in my right lung. My right lung would fill up over and over again. At one point, they actually put a chest tube in, and I was in the hospital for 45 days with that chest tube in, because it kept filling up so quickly. I'd have it drained, and the next day it was full again. And the first time they drained it, it was 2.5 liters, which the entire lung was completely filled and collapsed. I was getting no air in that lung at all. But, and then another one is varices. You may get varices, and varices are caused by portal hypertension. Portal hypertension is the main portal vein that goes through your liver that delivers the old blood and also helps in process sending the new blood through into the heart to be recirculated. Well, that portal vein gets restricted and you start getting a backup. Well, that backup causes pressure, and that causes things called varices, expanded, enlarged veins that shouldn't be that way and shouldn't be poking through in areas that they're poking through, like in your esophagus and things like that. That's why a lot of times they'll want you to do a EGD scope down the throat every 6 months to check for it, and they'll probably also want you to do a ultrasound every 6 months to check for liver cancer, because if you have cirrhosis, you have a higher risk of getting the liver cancer as well. But with the fluid, the first thing is restricting the fluids. And if I remember correctly, when I was in the hospital first, they said not to go over 1,800 milliliters, which is like 2 bottles of soda. But I mean, don't drink nothing but soda. You should be drinking water. You should be adding electrolytes, things like that. Pedialyte's a really good one, but of course that's kind of expensive. So you could also get electrolytes in other forms as well, and some different drinks, and that's kind of up to you, your taste, your choice, that kind of thing. Electrolytes are very important as well. So, but you want to limit that fluid intake. They'll probably give you a diuretic, a pill to take that makes you pee constantly. That is going to help with relieving a lot of that buildup fluid that's on you. So that's important. So follow those directions. Make sure you take that medicine, even though it's irritating, and I know how irritating it can be. So that's important. But I would say, first and foremost, before starting anything, you got to get a mindset. And the mindset is so important. I remember when I was in really bad shape, this was August of 2022, they'd give me about 90 days. And they had turned me down for a liver transplant because I didn't have an adequate support system. Someone to say, I'll take care of them, be there for them for the next 6 months. I didn't have that. So they turned me down. They pretty much, gave me about 90 days at the time. And I finally got to the point now mind you, this is the time I had the chest tube in, and I was completely worn down. I had no energy. And then I finally made the decision that I'm not going to do this. I'm going to start exercising, walking, and I just started walking. I called the nurse in, let her know I wanted to walk. we got things together, and we started off slowly, halfway down the hall back, and we started that way, and then gradually continued, and eventually I got to the point where I could leave my hospital room and just walk around whenever I felt fit, just letting them know, and that's what I did. I walked around, and then finally I was able to leave the floor and go to like they had like a garden outside on the roof, and I was able to go there. Obviously couldn't leave the building, that kind of thing. And of course, this was all when I was in the hospital. That might not pertain to you. Maybe you're at home, but still the same kind of thing. Exercising, moving around, continuously move. Body emotion tends to stay in motion, right? So the more energy you spend, the more energy you're going to get back. You know, think of it like a river versus a pond. Rivers are constantly moving, flowing, changing. You know, you never see the same water twice because that water has moved on. You know, there's life teeming in it. There's life on the outside. It goes through rocks and different sands and stuff like that, debris, and it continues going over those and making its way through. As opposed to a pond that has no exits, no entrances, it's just standing water. And a lot of ponds wind up with algae turning green. You know, it's not water you would jump in and go swimming in, that kind of thing. You know, you'd want to stay out of that kind of water, other than maybe to fish. But, you know, that's something else. But the point is, keep moving. Be like the river. Don't stop. You know, you got to get a mindset about you that it's going to beat you or you're going to beat it. There might not be a perfect outcome at the end. Maybe it's pretty dim for you. And trust me, I've been there. But you can't let that stop you. Because just because a doctor gives you a number or you read something on Google that, you know, time frame is this and that, live each day like it matters. You know, do something. You know, for me, I'm completely on my own. I'm by myself, which is difficult at times. But I still find different things that I can do. I have some reptiles and things like that. And, you know, I go to church and, you know, I go to a men's prayer group, you know, to get out of the house and, you know, at least do something. I'll go to my local Walmart just to like walk around to get exercise. You know, it's not an exciting life by any means, but I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. Maybe tomorrow is going to bring something really good. I have no idea, but I'm not going to give up and not find out, because there are many things I hope for, and you got to find those things for yourself. And they're going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to have a different goal, a different little victory that they want to achieve. And that's the key. It's the small victories. It's not, you know, oh, I want to get back to doing, you know, climbing mountains like I used to, or, you know, working on heavy diesels or whatever, fill in the blank. You know, it might not be that you know, don't set your goals too far in advance where they're out of your reach and you're never going to achieve them, because that's going to set yourself up for failure, and you don't want to do that. So remember, you are sick. You are fighting with a disability. You know, you're not at your best. Don't expect everything you do to be at its best. You know, you have to kind of accept that, and accept that, you know, sometimes you need help, and accept that, you know, sometimes you got to spend time at doctors, and sometimes you just got to do things you don't want to do. And that's the kind of mindset you got to kind of set yourself in, and try to stay out of the gutter of the bad stuff, you know, stay away from that stinky thinking, you know, the bad stuff, the stuff in your mind. I'll never be able to do this again. I can't do that again. I don't have any of this in my future. Because to be truthful, you don't know what your future is going to bring. It could bring something good. And maybe my percentage of something good is less than something bad tomorrow. You know what? I'm going to be ignorant to it and blissed, and, you know, and go for it anyway. Because, again, even if it's a small chance, it's still a chance. But if I give up, I'll miss it. And I don't want to miss it. So that's, you know, I keep pushing on because of that. And, you know, one of the other things that's important is, one, if you're drinking, stop drinking right away. You know, and I know that's tough. That is a very hard thing, you know. I fortunately did not have a problem stopping drinking. I had quit before I even went in. I only drank for about 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And there were 2 periods throughout that where I didn't drink for 3 months straight, both those times. So I didn't really have a problem giving it up. I didn't really miss it. I didn't have those withdrawals. But I do know that those withdrawals can be real and they can be devastating and they can be painful and they can be hard to cope with and deal with. That's the point where you got to ask for help. Reach out. You know, you don't know who's going to take your hand, but if you don't reach your hand out there, nobody's going to take it. And, you know, you need help sometimes. Sometimes we can't do this on our own. And there is help out there, even for somebody like me who's completely on their own, you know, no family, friends, that kind of thing close. You know, I still have avenues. I have therapists I deal with, doctors. You know, there are numbers you can call. You'd have to look up in your area. You can Google it. There are different avenues, you know, that you could take, but you have to want to. And that is the key. And it's easier said than done for sure. But little victories, start with one day, you know? Heck, if that seems difficult, start with 12 hours and then go to the next 12 hours. You know, little victories to make a whole. And that's so important. Tylenol can be damaging to the liver. I would definitely check with your liver doctor or your GI doctor before taking any over-the-counter medicines if you already have a bad liver. Some of those things that are out there, like milk thistle and all those things that claim to liver cleanse, there is no real proof of this. In fact, there has been some proof of the opposite. When somebody goes into cirrhotic liver, their liver is already weak, and then they put something in their body that's trying to make their liver work harder, and it's not able to keep up. So some of those different herbal supplements that claim to help the liver may actually cause more issues in a cirrhotic person. And there's actually some facts they found for this. If you Google it and look it up, you can actually find what I've found. Now, of course, you know, all those things, there's no medical background to say. And I know that there's people out there that say, oh, the medical field is all this and it's all that. And you know what? You can argue that on both sides of the fence. I guess you got to kind of do what you feel comfortable with. Me, myself, I don't feel comfortable putting that stuff into my body because I don't know how it's going to react, so I don't. And that's my choice. Now, whatever your choice might be, I'm not going to fault you for it. And, you know, if you get good luck off it, then I wish you all the best. But I do definitely recommend following your doctor's medicines prescribed. That is so important. With liver disease, there's not a whole lot. There's the diuretic that you can take for the fluid. And then there's Xifaxan, which is a pill. It's kind of like an antibiotic for your brain. It helps to protect your brain from ammonia poisoning, because when your liver's bad, it can poison your blood with excess ammonia, and that can get to your brain, and that can cause you to have hepatic encephalopathy, which is pretty much a type of insanity. I actually had one really bad situation with this, and it was scary. I didn't really know there was no normal thinking in my mind. I became paranoid. I was in the hospital at the time. I had gone 10 days without eating because of the other issue I have. And the feeding tube is not related to the liver disease, by the way. That is not a common thing. Just wanted to mention that. That's because of the hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome I have, which is completely separate. Not everybody who has liver disease obviously has that. It's kind of a really weird combination. Anyway, but you definitely want to follow those recommendations as far as the medicine. And the Xifaxan, like I mentioned, that protects the brain. And then you have lactulose, which is gross and nasty. It's this really thick, sweet syrup that you take. And the way that works is it goes into your system and it actually binds with the ammonia. and then it flushes it out when you go to the bathroom. That's how that works. And I found that I've had to increase it occasional times because I've had things like the hand flaps or the hands are moving, twitching, things like that. A little bit of mood change that didn't seem normal to me. Little things like that. And if you notice any of these, I would contact your doctor, and then they can decide what to do from there. The blood tests for ammonia levels, most liver doctors don't do them because it's kind of a false thing, because they say not to be over 30, whatever it is, and on average my ammonia has been around 100, and I'm completely fine and normal. They base it on symptoms, but again, that is something that you'd want to talk to your liver doctor with. But anyway, you definitely want to follow those medical instructions for sure. So, and as far as food goes, one, I would definitely recommend stop eating out anywhere that's like a fast food place. You want good cooked food, chicken, pork, beef's okay too, but chicken and pork tend to have more protein because what happens is your body isn't processing the protein the way it's supposed to. It's actually wasting it. So when you're not giving yourself enough protein, it starts eating the muscles in your body, and that starts taking down your muscle mass, and can start with your arms and legs and things like that, and then start working its way in, and that's really bad. So you definitely want to keep your protein levels up high, and your liver doctor should be able to set a goal of whatever that might be for your case of how much grams of protein you should be taking a day. I'm on a feeding tube, so my protein is actually in the fluid. I have a higher protein formula that I take in my case, but before having to get the feeding tube in, I would home cook stuff, and it's just me, so maybe I'd make something and I'd split it up into two, so I'd have it for lunch the next day, that kind of thing. You definitely want to try to focus on the protein, and everything that I would eat would be some kind of protein oriented. If I wanted a snack food, Greek yogurt was a really good snack food because I had high protein. Instead of eating a dessert or something, I do a Greek yogurt. Some of those are really good. And, even for something sweet, like I found rice pudding's got some protein in it, not a ton, but it's got more protein than what most sweet things do. So, that's an option as far as something just as a treat, that's got some protein in it. But you definitely want to kind of stick to the higher protein meals. And, there's a lot of meals out there that are frozen, ready to go, that are protein oriented. I try to stay away from those because there's a lot of fillers and different things like that in there. There's a lot of preservatives and stuff like that. I did try to avoid those things and make everything fresh if I could. If I had to go out, I would try to do like Subway, where I could get meat and stuff like that, that wasn't fried or, made with a lot of fat and stuff like that, because a lot of those fats and stuff, they can be harmful for the liver too. And again, you want to get yourself in a healthy state of mind, exercising, the protein, keeping the sugary stuff, to a minimum. I'm not saying not to have any sweets ever, because I do here and there, or did, but keep it at a minimum. And, breakfast, I would do like scrambled eggs, or I would do a protein oatmeal, or a protein pancake, something like that. But eggs is a good one, even with, you can, Canadian bacon was a real good option. You could fry some of that up, and that was good with it as opposed to regular bacon, because you got a lot of fat in that. But you can do that too. I'm not going to tell you not to eat bacon. That would be a crime, right? But, those are some options as well. But the diet's so important, your state of mind, limiting your fluids. It's actually fairly simple, and those are the best things you can really do for yourself when it comes to trying to prolong your liver life. You know, it's all in the mindset about being willing to change the diet and being willing to change your habits. Because let's face it, diets are a lot of times based on habits. You know, we tend to stop somewhere and get something quickly because we're used to going, go, you know, and you may have to wind up slowing down and taking a step back and taking a little extra time to do these things. So those are a good idea to be able to, stick with that. So, and again, these different things are things that have worked for me, that I found that are good for the liver and which work in that case. I would definitely recommend, don't take just the word of some guy on the on YouTube. I wouldn't tell you to do that. Definitely make sure that check in with your doctors and things like that, and make sure that they stay in the loop. A nutritionist is a good thing to have. If you can get one of those on board, that's definitely helpful as well. The exercising, whatever that might be for you. I have multiple hernias, and those are due to the connective tissue disorder. So a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of that lifting weights and all that kind of stuff is kind of out for me. So I do different things. Mostly I do a lot of walking, a lot of stretches and things like that. But the connective tissue disorder that I have kind of changes that for me. And like I said, that is not a normal thing for people who have liver cirrhosis. So if you're able, and I know that liver cirrhosis can take a lot out of you and make you really, really tired, and maybe, just a little bit at a time. And that might be the key. Maybe instead of doing a half an hour workout, do it for 10 minutes. Instead of doing half an hour once, do it 10 minutes for 3 different times a day. Maybe do 10 minutes and 2 hours, do 10 minutes and 2 hours, do 10 more minutes. Nothing says that it has to be set in stone, that it's got to be this particular way. You got to kind of mold it to your life and your disability and the things you're going through to be able to make those things fit. And that's the key. Once you get into that new routine, it becomes easier. And that is so important. Remember, stay that river, You don't want to be the pond, you want to be the river, and keep pushing through. But anyway, that's about all for this video. I want to thank everybody who watched it. I appreciate all your support. I appreciate it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, you can hit the follow button, and that would be helpful to me as well if you like what you saw. Also, in the about section, there is, if you want to help me out, there is a link for that as well. But again, I want to thank everyone for watching. Stay blessed and have a wonderful day.